probably a good place to start. I usually roll into these podcasts, so you don't own an iron. That's
I don't own an iron.
You don't own an iron?
No.
Why not?
I think I have some sort of logic that I think I completely made up myself, which is if you hang clothes long enough, they'll iron themselves.
Ah, well, hey, that makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Put them under the mattress, put them on something heavy.
Yeah. And also, I feel like the kind of sort of unmade look is kind of trendy, maybe.
It's extremely trendy. But are you at many events where people would expect you to have ironed clothes neat and tidy because you're so outdoorsy in the wilderness, running on beaches, chasing nature?
Well, I think I feel obligated to have some sort of ironed garment on, but actually, I don't. So, I don't have an iron, so I can't make it happen.
You can't
I think
make it
my
happen.
mum. I think it's my mum's voice in my head actually that thinks, Sophie, you should have ironed that top.
Uh-huh. So what's the feel at Kendal? What's the feel here? This is a bit of an unironed event. There's a lot of
it's way more my kind of thing.
It is, isn't it?
Jackets, hats, trainers, jeans. You know, straight off the trails.
Comfy.
Yeah.
Comfy
in a
event.
bar in your down jacket.
And when did you get here?
Got here last night. Actually, well, yesterday afternoon, because I saw Damien Hall, who was amazing.
Yeah.
And then George Monbiot straight after, who was, my brain imploded watching him in a good way. Yeah, no, there's such a buzz. It's a great vibe.
And have you been down to base camp yet? Have you been down? Because down there is busy. There's so many awesome brands. The ambassadors are all rolling around. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I went. I had a little mooch around last night when it was all closed up. But I haven't been today. But yeah, I'm excited to go down. There's just so much going on. It's great.
And you yourself, obviously, you're going to be busy here. Forget Me Not, your book. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about how excited you are with how well it's doing.
Thank you. Well, it's exciting, but I'm overwhelmed really by how much people want to talk about it, because I don't think I've figured out in my head quite how to talk about it, because it feels very weird. Writing is a very private endeavour, and it was very solo, not just because I was doing it during the pandemic when we weren't allowed to see anybody, but also because you have to sort of completely retreat into your own head in order to do it. And then all of a sudden you've got to be a spokesperson for it, and I feel like I'm not only a spokesperson for the book but also for the 10 species that I spotlight, also for the scientists that I interview, and the message as a whole. So it's been an amazing ride, but yeah, I've been completely overwhelmed by how busy I've been with it.
And where did it start for you? Where did the environment and nature and everything that you're interested in that sort of gathered in the book, where did that start from you? Is it from childhood? Is it from an early age?
Yeah, I guess so, to a certain extent. So I'm very lucky that my parents are both very adventurous and really prioritised an outdoorsy way of living. You know, we didn't have loads of money growing up, but we were outside every weekend. We were very lucky to grow up in Devon. And so our parents taught us from an early age that, you know, there's no such thing as bad weather. You get wet and windy and muddy and everything, and that's kind of the good way to live. And we didn't really travel. I was born in America, but as soon as we moved to England when I was 5, we had very local holidays, you know, camping and going to Wales and the Lake District and Scotland. And so actually being here in Cumbria is really special because I have lots of fond memories of, you know, following Dad up mountains and things and wandering around lakes and going kayaking and stuff. But I think it's just been a way, the outdoors and just getting outside, whatever the weather, has just been normalised for me, which is really lucky because it's a privileged thing, I think. And so I didn't realise quite how important it was to me until that element of my life went on hold when I was at university living in Bristol, and then I had lots of knee surgery, so I spent a lot of time not being able to get outside and move and run and ride and all the things that I love. And so I think it's almost been like a sort of slightly indulgent endeavour of how can I create a career in something that I can do every day that incorporates all the things that I love, that, you know, the adventure, the writing, the communicating. So I think it's very much part of who I am. It's
something that I touch on all the time, as I can hear my kids giggling just from a couple of sofas away. But we say it's easy. We say to our kids, your skin's waterproof. Get outside. It doesn't matter if it's raining.
How barrier.
What do you say to children or parents that maybe approach you to say, look, it's easy to say that. It's easy to do it. And I try to do it. We sometimes, Abby and I, we struggle to get the kids out when it's pouring with rain. And we think, God, why are we doing this? But once they're in it, it's hard to get them out of it. They realise that the coldness quickly goes away, the wetness becomes fun, the welly boots full of water is enjoyable. What do you say to parents?
I think just not overthink it.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's like an aversion to nature massively in our society, in terms of, you know, we like nature when it's there on our terms in its little box. We've labelled it, we've kind of isolated it, we can have control over when and how we experience it and what it looks like and everything. But we need to take a step back, and we need to remember that we are totally part of it, and the most valuable experiences that we can have ourselves are when we totally surrender to the natural world and not kind of worry about, oh, but what if this, what if I get muddy, what if blah blah blah. You know, we've evolved on this planet to be part of the natural landscape, and you know, we need to keep remembering that, and not to sort of try and isolate ourselves and control everything. So I think the main thing is just get out, get in there, not overthink, and you'll be way better for it.
It's something I know that you're super passionate about, is reintroducing animals back into the wilderness.
Yeah.
Tell us some of the animals. Sort of, do you have favourites? Is there some? Can we throw some beaver innuendos in there?
We can indeed. There's always a good beaver innuendo. Part of all my day job, really, my bread and butter is I work in the communications team for a relatively young charity, just a couple of years old, called Beaver Trust, and we are restoring Britain, England's beaver population to help regenerate the landscapes that have been lost. So river catchments and wetlands, and beavers are an incredible keystone species. And I feel quite sad in a way, because I study zoology at university, and not once did we learn about a beaver. We learn about chimpanzees and lions and nematodes and the oceans and sharks and all these sorts of like traditionally sexy animals, but not once did we learn about beavers, who are an integral part of the fabric of Britain. And so to be part of a charity that is kind of on the front lines of a really topical area of conservation at the moment, in terms of rivers, water quality, reintroducing mammals that haven't been in our landscape for centuries, is a hugely exciting and steep learning curve.
But tell me, I mean, that I'm not as familiar with beavers, obviously, in that sort of outdoor.
Hey.
But tell me, what do they bring to our environment?
Yeah.
What do they do to help us, to help the waterways?
Oh, they just do so much. I think they're the most amazing teachers of ecology. They are not only keystone species, where they exert a disproportionate impact on a habitat in relative to their number and their size, but they're also ecosystem engineers. So that, you know, within days of arriving in a river catchment, they can modify that to kind of beyond recognition of what it once was. Their dams slow the flow of the river, which helps to reduce the impacts of flooding, helps to retain water in the land, which helps with drought and wildfire. I think a colleague once said that beavers are the fuel to the biodiversity bonfire.
Okay.
So put a beaver in a landscape, they regenerate that river, they breathe life back into it through all sorts of, you know, their dams can help reduce pollution and help filter the water to improve water quality downstream. And in doing all of that, they make the river catchment way more hospitable to all kinds of nature, insects, birds, other mammals, fish. And so, you know, in a time when our rivers are, 100% of England's rivers are failing water quality tests, we need all the help we can get, and beavers do that for free.
And why are we losing them so rapidly? Why are they so scarce? What's happening? What's the source of that?
So beavers, actually, we hunted them to extinction 400 years ago. So we hunted them for their really luxurious fur, and also their castoreum, which is a secretion that is still used largely around the world in vanilla essence, in perfumes and things like that. So it was very valuable, and having a beaver pelt and a beaver hat was a symbol of wealth and aristocracy. And so they were totally gone. We completely wiped them out. And so in the last 400 years, Britain has had very little beaver activity. But in those 400 years, we've had agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, technological revolution. So the country's changed beyond recognition. But suddenly we've got the second largest rodent in the world back on our doorstep. And we're trying to figure out a way to live alongside it when we've got farmland next to rivers, communities next to rivers, urban sprawl. So that everything's a little bit tighter and more claustrophobic. And these animals need space to do what they need to do and to give us the ecosystem services that they can. And so they're slowly coming back. We've been sourcing populations in England from Scotland, where they've had beavers for a bit longer than we have, but then also Norway, because we've got to make that gene pool a lot bigger. Otherwise, if we're sourcing beavers from just one place, the beavers back in England will be basically interrelated and won't do very well.
Okay, and moving to another sort of species that's of interest, because there's just such interesting animals, but wolves, the reintroduction of wolves, where are you on that, and are we close to seeing that? Have we seen it already in some places? And
it's tricky because I think, there are the conversation on wolves and their reintroduction, especially in places like Scotland, is gaining momentum, but it's the same kind of thing of, in England, we hunted and we've lost all our apex predators largely. And so that's why we have such enormous numbers of deer in Scotland, because they aren't being predated. We haven't got that structure. We haven't got that food chain. We haven't got the predators at the top keeping everything in check. And so the idea of having something like a wolf seems scary. And then it's up to communicators and people in my job, I guess, to understand the science, to unpick it, dissect it, and then help people understand, okay, well, actually, what could wolves bring that we can't bring ourselves? What benefits could they have when people are concerned about wolves? How can we mitigate those concerns? And so I think we're still at the early days of the wolf conversation, but I think beavers kind of set the example and are a real test for us as humans as to how ready are we to accept a more dynamic kind of tradition, like messy environment where we're welcoming back species that have every right to be here. And so it's a really interesting time, but I think it's very much hanging in the balance as to what's next.
Okay, and across social media, obviously, the posts you put out can be very entertaining, but they get the message across. How important is social media to you to get your message to the right people, to get it to the people that will listen and make the changes?
Social media is an amazing tool. I actually studied it for my master's in terms of from a science communication standpoint, as to how receptive are people online who want to receive very short, instantaneous, like entertaining, casual content immediately. How receptive are they to content that has a bit more of a purpose and a message, especially to do with nature, conservation and the climate? And it's been an amazing ride. I mean, Instagram has obviously rocketed. When I started studying social media, TikTok didn't even exist, and now it's taking over the world. It's an amazing way to reach an audience of infinite number across the world and to help you communicate it in a way that perhaps reaches them that traditional media has failed to. I think it helps bring more personality and humanity back into these difficult conversations as well. So I think people feel more relaxed on social media to be themselves and to let their personality come through. And I think when we're talking about difficult conversations like climate change and species reintroductions and the future, adding the person back into the picture is really important. I think social media is amazing to help with that.
You touched on COVID earlier. Obviously, we were all in lockdown. Back at Kendal, as we sit here in the media room and it's busy and there's families, there's a whole mixture of people from all over the UK and the world. What does it mean to you for us all to get back together like this, to be able to tell your story face to face to people, to bump into people that you maybe haven't seen for years and tell them what you're up to now?
Oh, it's amazing. It's just the sense of community is difficult to describe. I think we've forgotten how powerful it is to just be in the same room as each other and to share ideas and share understanding. You know, that's how we evolved as humans. We evolved around campfires, sharing stories and sharing ideas and being with each other and bonding. And so I think this is an amazing example of basically taking a step back and going back to the roots of what's important to us and how we can connect, and we can only move forward and tackle these massive problems if we're pulling heads together and being with each other and listening and conversing. And so to have 4 amazing days of doing that with some incredible people is just very special.
As we sit here, I see my daughter approaching, trying to move a chair
She's
quietly.
Wearing a very cool fleece.
She is wearing.
I love what you're wearing.
She's desperate to speak to you after this. It's been a pleasure to have a chat. Thank you for joining me. I know you're going to be busy all weekend, but fantastic. And thanks for doing what you're doing for our world, for our environment, and keep putting out those social media, because you running across with low carbon emissions, everything you're doing and that message you're sending. Thank you for everything.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.